Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on personal branding. My name's Pia Castelli. I am one of the Assistant Directors of the College of Law in Western Australia, and today's presenter is Jason Elias. Jason has over 21 years experience in finding the top legal talent in Australia for law firms, not-for-profits, government and in-house legal teams. As the founder and CEO of Elias Recruitment, he's passionate about finding quality matches in the legal professional space. Elias Recruitment is one of Australia's most trusted legal recruitment brands. Since 2000, we have helped over 600 lawyers around Australia find great career opportunities and assisted clients finding quality legal professionals they could not source themselves. From this stage, I will hand you over to Jason. I'm sure you will get a lot out of today's session. And if you do have any questions for Jason, if you could just use the Q&A function, I will monitor that and I'll let Jason know as and when your questions arise.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you for the kind words, and welcome to all those attending. I know it's a Friday afternoon, so I appreciate you putting in some time and effort into your own careers, and hopefully I'll give you a few pointers and some good takeaways for you to look forward to what hopefully will be better times going forward. There are a few points that I wanted to cover off today, just to give you a little bit of background, to put some context around my background and how that is hopefully useful to understand the context of the discussions. Talk to you about what's happening in the COVID world, the obvious elephants in the room. Talk generally about career management, how people can source opportunities. And then the big ticket items, I want to give you some practical tips on your CV and LinkedIn profiles. And then hopefully we'll have some time to discuss interview preparation and skills, and then have time for questions and answers at the end. So feel free to get those juices flowing, and it would really make me very happy to answer some of your questions towards the end. So think of the things as practical, and if they've got application to more than just your specific thing but might be useful to other people, then that would be great as well. Just a very quick background to me. I went through the College of Law in '96. I joined what was the biggest firm in the world at the time, Bakers. After several years of drafting multi-options syndicated cash advance facilities, I thought I wanted to do something a bit different. So I founded my own business in May 2000. Today's the 1st of May, which means we've hit 20 years, which is quite nice. We've placed, I don't know, I haven't done the maths on it, but somewhere between 500 and 700 lawyers in different jobs. We've got people in my team based in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth. For those of you who are part of the college, I'm the current chair of the Alumni Association. In the recruitment industry, there's a peak body called the RCSA. I'm the chair of New South Wales and the ACT. And there's also a global body called NPA Worldwide, which is a network of 550 recruitment companies that work together. And I was recently elected the chair in New Orleans a few weeks ago, which was one of the most exciting highlights of my life until I got home and had to be quarantined for 2 weeks in isolation in a small room, which was probably one of my lowlights of my life, coming straight after. So it's been a very rocky world for many people, but you know, for me it was only inconvenience. Other people have had more serious things, so I send my thoughts and wishes to all those people who've had it a lot harder than what I can say I did. So they're describing the world as VUCA, which is a wonderful acronym, which means it's volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. Nobody knows what's happening. There's all sorts of stories about what we can do, we can't do, looking at different options of what's happening overseas. And for the first time, and I've been through 3 recessions now, this isn't just economic, it's health related. I was walking down the main streets of Sydney a couple of hours ago, and it definitely reminds me of scenes from The Walking Dead. There's just something ominous about the way things are at the moment. But I think in Australia, we've handled it very well. I think as the Prime Minister today talked about relaxing some of the restrictions, and fingers crossed that will allow the commercial world to get back on its feet. At the moment, most of the jobs I have, excluding my government clients, are in either wait and see mode or put on hold for the foreseeable future. So in tough times, it's hard to hire people. There are a few roles going, and as I said, I do work on a federal government panel, and we've got quite a lot of work through that. There are pockets. You can imagine people like insolvency and commercial litigation is quite busy. Areas like transactional work, particularly corporate commercial, a bit quieter. Areas like employment law, where there's a lot of inquiries around hiring, firing, redundancies, JobKeeper, that's quite busy as well, quite a lot happening there. And I imagine with all the people being locked in together, family lawyers may find between 6 to 9 months down the line that they're a bit busier than usual. I say that somewhat flippantly, but historically over recessions there has been an increase in family law matters. But there are some silver linings. I mean, I've been around this legal world for 25 years, and I've met partners that say, no, there's no way it would ever work. My staff have to be sitting in an office on the same floor as me in a CBD. But look what's happened. COVID's come through, and all of a sudden flexibility has been forced upon us. And I think they're seeing how lawyers in particular can work well, they can manage themselves, they still have access to the materials. We're all connected online, and I think the productivity hasn't been necessarily an issue. And I think that, hopefully in a post-COVID world, the new normal includes greater flexibility for legal teams. I think there's a lot more humanisation. A few years ago, there was a trust index of how many people trusted their employer, and it was quite a small number, surprisingly, and that has done a 180. I think if anything's taught us, this crisis has humanised the workforce, and people feel a lot more connected to their firms. It's amazing how tech has reshaped the world. You can see everything from being able to share documents to being able to have Zoom meetings to being able to, access information at a moment's notice. The tech has definitely made this easier. Can you imagine trying to organise law firms in the late 90s or something in the pre-sophistication that we have with the technology now? Upskilling is very important. A lot of people are using this quiet time to develop their skills, and people are doing things that are a little bit out of left field, like learning technology, learning how to code, learning how to get into areas that are in demand, like cybersecurity, for example. And the other thing that's quite important is a lot of people are doing quite a lot in the world of community service. I found myself with a few extra hours to kill and wanted my kids to get involved in a project. So I set up a Facebook group and competition for recipes, and we had I think 400 people sign up in the first week, and people shared recipes online. It gave people a sense of purpose, and was didn't make any money, but it was a bit of fun, and hopefully it gave people a little bit of distraction. There is a really interesting article that I'd recommend to people in the Harvard Business Review Ascend, and it's particularly aimed at grads, and it's called How Graduates Can Manage Their Career Amid Coronavirus. So if you get a chance, you might want to Google that. It's definitely a worthwhile read. So what can job seekers do now? Okay, so a lot of people, if you're in work, hopefully the JobKeeper has kept you in that. I know some firms, what I heard of today, has asked staff to reduce by 20%. And a lot of people seem to be willing to make some sacrifice in order to stop redundancies of their colleagues. Some firms, and it seems to be the ones that weren't necessarily travelling as well beforehand, are the ones that are facing trouble now. But a lot of firms will be able to ride this out. They'll just have to do a few things a little bit cleverer, a little bit more lean. Networking is important. The fact that you're on this Zoom at the moment is, preaching to the converted a little bit, but be out there and meet people, network. LinkedIn and social media are great for that. And we will discuss that in a bit of greater depth further down the line. Be strategic and unique, particularly if you're applying for jobs. There have got to be a lot more candidates on the market, and it was only maybe 2 months ago we described it as one of the tightest and most candidate short legal markets ever. In fact, if you went on to Seek and you looked at the top 20 hardest roles to fill, 10 out of the 20 roles were for lawyers, even though lawyers make up less than 2% of the working population. So we're just overrepresented in how hard those were jobs to fill. In a matter of 2 months, that has done a complete reversal, and now you'll find that jobs are a lot harder to find, and candidates have lost the bargaining position they did have. I think upskilling is important, as I mentioned before. Do lots of reading, engage in podcasts. There's a whole lot of great podcasts out there. I think every man, woman and their dog have launched a podcast in the last couple of months. There are various degrees of quality, but try to find ones that are relevant, particularly to your niche. If you work in construction law, then follow not just legal stuff, but construction stuff. And also, it's a bit obvious to say, but please take care of yourself. I mean, it is an unprecedented time in terms of social isolation. There is a lot of issues around mental health that we won't even begin to know the effects of what's happening now for a long time. I'm very lucky. I have a wonderful wife and 3 kids, so we have plenty of noise in our house, but I feel for people that might be isolated on their own. My poor mum's at an age where we've just encouraged her to stay at home, and I think it's a lot harder when you've got to be in that isolation. So I don't know all your specific situations, but make sure that you've got your camaraderie and you're taking care of yourself. And one of the things that I found is quite useful is we've been having virtual drinks online. So friends, we get together on Zoom. I know there's another app called House Party, but just keep in touch with people. At work, we have the lunchroom and the water cooler to have a chat. Make sure that you're scratching that itch some other way by picking up the phone and chatting or scheduling a Zoom call. Very important you take care of yourself in this time. So a little bit obvious, and I'm sorry, I don't have a read of the audience. I don't know how many people are quite senior lawyers or how many people are grads, but just to cover this very quickly, there are lots of career options with your law degree. The obvious one is a lawyer in a firm. Some people might be considering the legal practice management course and going out on their own, and there's nothing like a crisis to make you reevaluate and think whether that's something you might want to do. Some people decide they want to go to the bar if they've got a particular passion for litigation or advocacy. There's been a steady flow in-house over the last 10, 15 years, a massive increase in the number of lawyers that practice in corporations. The community legal centre and not-for-profits, this is a real niche that we work in. We've worked in a lot of these not-for-profits. A lot of people who work there have come from bigger top-tier law firms, and they find that the satisfaction and the client contact give them a real sense of accomplishment. Obviously, the money is never the same in that sector. My wife works in the disability sector, and she works absolutely ridiculously long hours and hard and emotionally draining. But sadly, the money is not in certain sectors. Whereas, had she been in the corporate sector, it's a different situation. So there are always trade-offs. Government is actually a really good option in these sorts of quieter times. There's definitely a safe harbour in government, and my Commonwealth Government client that I'm working with now has never been busy in terms of hiring, and we're doing quite a lot of work with them at the moment. And obviously, a law degree opens a lot of doors elsewhere. You can get into policy or even politics. I know former Prime Minister Turnbull, Gillard, they both came from political backgrounds, from legal backgrounds. John Howard as well was a sole practitioner. So if you're interested in either policy in the bureaucracy or in politics itself, a law degree can be a really nice launching pad. The commercial world, a lot of people go into banking. A lot of people have startups. There are lots of ways you can use the skills you learn within law to build a business. Legal publishing is an industry where a lot of people who liked writing essays at uni venture into publishing. It's one of the industry that's probably has been pretty poorly affected by not just COVID-19, but over several years. the diminishing of revenue. I think some people have described it as death of by 1,000 cuts, and definitely the big publishing houses had much bigger teams several years ago than they do now. Some people are interested in academia, going into either the universities or the TAFE or the school systems, being able to teach legal subjects. Legal tech is a huge growth area. A lot of people building apps and websites and programs that help everything from, for example, automated discovery and AI to blockchain. And if you have a particular interest in legal tech, I'd refer you to look up the college's own Centre of Legal Innovation, run by Terry Mottershead, and also the ALTA, which is the association that runs legal tech events, and often some really cool pitching contests as well. Legal events, and this includes things like CPD and conferences, probably will be pretty badly affected in the short to medium term with COVID, but has seen some good days in the past. And legal costs consultants is another area. There's a lot of them, but they're just a few things to whet your appetite. How are we going? Pia, do you want to do any questions so far, or do you want me to keep pressing on?
Jason, there are a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question is, do you feel that business that traditionally denied the use of technology for working remotely would revert to the status quo or embrace the smart use of technology?
I think it's one of those things that if you said, hey, let's work remotely and it will work, a lot of partners of a particular generation, I think, would probably have found that a really hard argument to swallow. I think that the fact that COVID has forced them into doing that, they've been able to see that it actually can work. And obviously there are certain things that you need to do, and there are certain communication ways that are slightly different when you're not sitting in an office with somebody. But I definitely think there will be a lot more opportunity for flexibility. And dare I say it, it's not necessarily just motivated by wanting to do good for your staff, even though we'd hope that would be it. I think a lot of law firms will look at this as an opportunity to reduce overhead. So they will say, wow, we've got fancy schmancy offices in the main street of town. Maybe we don't need such big floor space, and maybe we can allow, people to work from home, and we can reduce our rent. And I think the hip pocket will dictate that as much as being able to cater for the whims and the requirements of the staff.
Mm. Now, the next question is, looking at job boards, it's a frequent sight to see recruitment agencies posting jobs that on application or inquiry don't seem to exist or have been fulfilled. How do we filter these effectively so as not to miss real opportunities?
So I've heard that argument, but in the 20 years I've been recruiting, I've never ever placed an ad for a job that didn't exist. Because quite frankly, I have to pay Seek $200 per ad. If I'm not going to get a return on my investment, I can't see why I'd do that. I'd much prefer to place an ad for something, to spend money where I can make a placement and do a match. Now, I do understand that at some of the bigger agencies, they have quotas, and there might be consultants that have been forced to do things just so they can tick a box or a KPI. I don't understand why you do that. It just makes noise. And quite frankly, I prefer to have just people that match my current ads and be able to find them something real, because the commodity I don't have much of is time. So spending time placing ads up there or getting candidates that don't match my ads just makes no commercial sense. Forget any ethical obligations, which are obviously important. It's the fact that where the job may already be filled, that's something we don't have much control over, because at the same time a client may come to us, they may also go to other agencies, and they may also be recruiting themselves. So at any given time, we don't necessarily know where they are in the process. And there are times where I've got a great candidate and I'll ring up the client and they'll say, look, we've seen somebody today, we really, really like them. It looks like we're going to go to offer. And the other thing is, job boards like Seek have your ads running for 30 days. And quite frankly, the amount we pay them, I don't want to go up and remove an ad until I know the person is sitting there. because I can tell you what, there are a lot of people who will ring me on a Sunday night before they're meant to start and say something's happened in their life or they've got another offer or whatever. So we just like to keep the ads up there for the maximum period, just to protect, to have a plan B, as a matter of fact. Now, sometimes that's a little bit inconvenient, but I don't think there are any recruiters out there trying to deceive or have phantom ads for phantoms just to trick you. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team. We want to get you jobs, and we want to be creative, but at the same time balance our time and not waste time and be efficient in getting you jobs.
So we've got a few more questions, Jason. Would you like to save them for later?
Your call. I'm happy to do whatever you like.
Okay. Well, I've had a few people ask for details of that Harvard Business Review article that you spoke about.
Yeah. So if you just let me slide back to. So can you see the bottom of that slide? Yeah.
Your slide menu's over the top.
Sorry. I'm not sure how I can move that. All right. It's called How Graduates Can Manage Their Career Amid Coronavirus by Vasundari Sawhney. And it's, I think, the current HBR Ascend. Yep. Any other questions?
Sorry, Jason, I was just typing that down. Now, one person has said that they're interested in your thoughts on the volume of work at the bar in the employment and industrial practice area.
I really don't know. We recruit predominantly in sectors where people are employees, and because barristers are self-employed in all states other than WA, it's very hard for me to say. I think I read Workplace Express and different publications, and there seems to be a lot there, but I see that on the demand side. I don't know the supply. Your state bar association would be a better contact point to ask those specific questions.
Jason, do you see larger firms from the cities offering employment and allowing remote work from across our country?
I think pre-COVID, there would be a great big reluctance to do that. I think everything's up in the air now, and there may be opportunities, but I think at the very least they would want somebody to be inducted into their systems and their culture for the first little while. So I can't imagine it would be a completely remote thing. I imagine it would probably be the ability to do some remote down the line.
And our last question so far. Please address the issue where you are called for an interview but do not have sufficient experience given you are a fresh graduate.
Yep. So the first thing is you can't make stuff up. You can't invent 20 years at a top-tier law firm. So the key is that you just have to show as best as you can maybe something analogous. So they may say, for example, something along the lines of, I noticed here that we want somebody who's got corporations law, and you've not done that before, but you've done commercial law. And you could say, well, yes, I was working in commercial law. Occasionally there were areas that were that touched on corporate, and because I've been trained in legal research, there are always areas any lawyer will come across that will be novel, but what I've got is the skills to be able to learn new things quickly, be able to adapt to what I already know, and to come up to speed as soon as possible. And the best thing about me, actually, Pia, is I know when to ask questions, and I don't ask silly questions. And I know that when I go to a partner to ask those questions, I've already done some preliminary research, so I'm presenting some options first. So they're not going to ask you hard copy questions about what Section 118 of a particular act says, but they will want to know your attitude and how you might go about solving the problem. A lot of you're usually up against other grads So it's not like you're fighting against people with experience. So it's apples versus apples. So what you need to do is show what are your unique selling points vis-a-vis other people.
Thanks, Jason.
So back to the slides, a couple of interesting observations about managing your career. One thing is it's important to look at your CV and realise that job hopping is never a good idea. And different generations have different ideas. So I know the generation above me, a lot of people would work at a firm, they'd join when they were 25 and then they'd get a gold watch when they retired. Maybe they'd moved a few times, but loyalty was a huge factor. My generation, probably an idea to stay 3 to 5 years at a firm. If you jumped a lot more than that, there was sort of eyebrows raised. The generation below me, it seems like if you're in a job for too long, you can get a bit stale. So I generally think that a lot of people are moving. If you look at their CV, they've got a lot of moves. They're not always because they've left a job. Often there's been mergers, there's been partners that they've followed, there've been projects that they've worked on and they've followed the people working on those projects. But just be careful you don't look too jumpy, because a lot of people looking at your CV will make an assumption that if you've moved 6 times in the last year, there's a good chance if they hire you, you'll move again. So just be careful of that. At the same time, you don't want to be stale. If you've been a senior associate at the same firm for 25 years, people are going to start asking questions about, will you ever make partner? Also, look at the reasons you're leaving. I get a lot of people come to me assuming the grass is greener, and then a few weeks into the new job say, oops, I really wish I'd done more research. So be careful why you leave a job. I would advise that where possible, and obviously it's not always within your control, try to have your next job locked in and secured before you quit your current job. And when you do leave on good terms. It's no point leaving with a bad reputation, because it's a small community and you'll run into people. Also, you don't want to leave any landmines in your files for people to file a bit later. That leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. And let's face it, you're also going to need your current firm as a referee. If anyone's doing a good reference check, they would like to speak to people that you've spoken to. If not for this job, for the next job. So it's a good idea to leave a firm on good terms. I remember they actually held a huge party for me at my old firm, and we ended up having big drinks, and I was very foolishly on a TV game show in the 90s, and somebody had conspired with my flatmate and got a copy of the video and showed it to the entire firm. So even if I had second thoughts and decided I wanted to stay, I had no more credibility once they'd seen that video, so I had to go. Managing your career. So it's important you develop a little bit of a career plan, work out where you want to go. So for example, if your idea is to become managing partner of King & Wood Mallisons, it's a different path to whether you want to be general counsel of NAB, which is a different path if you want to be a solicitor at a community legal centre. So think a few steps ahead, be strategic. Mentors or coaches can be great people. I remember partner at my old firm took me under his wings, and I just learnt so much. So being able to find somebody who you respect that's able to mentor or coach you is invaluable. Set milestones. If you want to be promoted, you want to be a senior associate by 5 years out, partner by 10 years out, whatever it may be, set yourself goals. And there's a lot of studies out there that say, if you look at the most successful people, a lot of them have this strategic goal setting as one of their daily mantras. Build a profile. Always good to be listed as like a young gun or a law awards winner or something along those lines. Get your name out there, blog, write articles, become a bit of a known, trusted advisor. Develop your technical skills, so your legal skills, your drafting skills, your advocacy skills, your communication skills, your bedside manner. And once again, your soft skills. So a lot of the really successful lawyers aren't necessarily the best technical lawyers, but what they may be good at is a balance of strong technical skills, but also strong people skills, business development skills, influencing and persuasion skills, communication skills, and even sometimes just a bit of commercial nous and personality, because if they're able to schmooze well and bring in work, then obviously their billings can be quite good, and that's well respected within that private practice environment especially. So how do you find jobs? I mean, this is pretty obvious, but there's two ways. There's active and passive. So active is when you're out on the job boards like your Seeks or Indeeds. Passives is probably a little bit, can be a combination of anything as subtle as on LinkedIn, clicking the box that says open to new opportunities, to maybe just reaching out to a recruiter. It's good to have one or two recruiters that you have a relationship with, that understand you and what you're looking for. So if something comes up, they can give you a tap on the shoulder. We've set up a job alert on our website. I'm sure lots of agencies will have that. So you can type in, I only want to hear about in-house roles in Sydney, and then you just get notified when those things that match your parameters come up. As previously discussed, build and promote your personal brand. Develop relationships with stakeholders. That could be, for example, journalists or potential clients. Understand that there's a hidden job market. So for every job that's listed on Seek, there's probably a number of jobs that never ever get the light of day, and they're filled by personal referrals. Often you'll find for an in-house role, there might be a secondee who's done well within the organisation, and then when a vacancy comes up, they tap the secondee on the shoulder. Look at the job boards and websites. I think Seek's probably got half as many ads as it did in February now. Look at social media. LinkedIn allows ads to be placed, and also word of mouth. And you'll find that barristers are very good sources of knowing where jobs are going. And often solicitors will say, hey, have you seen any good other solicitors in your travels, and particularly if you're doing appearances in court. Applying for positions. Now, obviously, it's a very uncertain market. Nobody knows what's going on. A lot of roles have been put on hold, but hopefully we're seeing some green shoots. Tailor your application. This is one of the biggest mistakes. People have a one-size-fits-all application, and that's not going to work. You need to personalise it, particularly if there are selection criteria, and this is vital in government jobs especially. Make sure not just your cover letter, but your CV addresses the selection criteria. Respond to calls for action. Sometimes they'll ask you to include your academics. If you don't get past the first base. So make sure you listen to what they've asked you. Think about what makes you special. You might have a language. You might have worked as a judge's associate. You might have got straight distinctions. You might have been an Olympic or a Paralympic contender. You might have had things outside of your legal world that make you interesting. And the other thing is, people hire for 3 reasons. So demonstrate how you've either made a company money, saved them money, or improved their systems. So before I go into CVs, this is probably a nice juncture to do a bit more Q&A if you'd like, Pia.
Perfect. We've got quite a few that have just come in. So the first couple are about how international students should go about trying to compete with local practitioners for roles.
So are we talking about graduate roles, or maybe just some paralegal roles while they're studying?
So I think from the way these questions are worded, they're entry-level lawyer roles.
Yes. So, okay, I'll caveat by saying recruiters, not just me, but all recruiters generally don't get graduate roles, because firms tend to hire through graduate programs or doing it themselves. So I don't have empirical data I can point to, but I can tell you anecdotally. I think that if you're an international student and you've done your degree here and you've got working rights, there's no reason I think you're at a disadvantage, other than the idea that maybe you're a flight risk, that a firm will train you up and that you'll leave to go back to your original jurisdiction. But quite frankly, there's no guarantees that people are going to stay more than 24 months anyway in a job, so that's not as big an issue. I think what you need to do is work on your strengths. So, for example, if you speak a language like Mandarin and a firm has a particular strong China practice, then they're things that you should be focusing on. Or maybe you've had experience in a previous jurisdiction and then come to Australia and requalified. then you're a few streets ahead of where people who haven't had that experience before are. But I don't think there's an easy answer to it, but I do think that I can't see some obvious disadvantages if you're admitted in the jurisdiction and you've got enough experience. The key will be whether you can your personality and your marks and those sorts of things more than whether you were or were not from another country originally. Working rights are a big issue, though. If you don't have working rights, it makes it a lot harder.
Sorry, Jason. There's also been a number of questions about mature age students who are struggling to get their foot in the door for graduate roles. Have you got any advice for them?
Yes, just persevere. I think that there are a lot of times where mature age students have advantages over graduates. I think that your life experience, you may have worked in an office environment. I knew when I started as a lawyer, yes, I was learning law, but I was also learning how to work in an office and how all the peculiarities of office politics worked and how you did this and how you structure your day. You're already leaps and bounds ahead on those sorts of things. I'd be lying if I didn't say that from time to time I have witnessed age discrimination. I think there are definitely times when people would think that there's a malleability in somebody who's probably a younger grad than an older grad, and people have hired on that basis. I think it's a misconception. I've pushed a lot of really good candidates who are mature age students into roles, and they've worked out very well. And I think the firms probably have reluctantly looked at them originally and then realised they've made a good call at the end of the day. And I mean, it's no secret. I think, and I was a mature age student when I did law as a postgrad, and us mature age students like to sit in the front row and answer questions, and I think that's something that definitely shines. And there's it's a choice that you have to have gone back to study law, and I think a lot of firms look on that brightly. But you will be no surprises. There will be some people that have an image of what they want to hire, and that will be a fresh first person out of university.
How should candidates deal with short-term roles if they were, for example, working as a contractor, or if they had to leave a workplace after a short period of time because they didn't agree with the work culture?
Sorry, I just got interrupted. Say that again for me, please, Pia.
How should people explain short-term roles on their resume, either because they took a series of roles as a contractor or because they left a job after a short period of time because they didn't gel with the workplace culture?
Sure. So I think there's an assumption that every role you put on your CV is a permanent role. So I would very clearly say 2-month contract successfully completed. Okay. And and particularly if you've got lots of little ones, do that so it doesn't look like you're job hopping. I think that's important. If you leave a particular job for ethical reasons or management reasons, it's very hard to say that in a CV, and I'd probably leave that for an interview. So I would probably just say I'd probably just leave it blank and just say, worked at this particular firm from this period to this period. And then if you get the opportunity in an interview, I'd be very conscious not to badmouth anybody, but just there are various ways you can say it. And I'm more than happy to talk to anyone one-on-one about, because I think it takes probably a lot more time than I can give now to go through that. But never badmouth your previous employer. It makes you look bad.
Do you have any tips for interviews where one's soft skills may significantly outweigh their technical hard skills or legal experience?
Well, I think as a graduate, you probably don't have that much legal experience. So you're really selling yourself on potential in a way, and soft skills definitely come through. I'm going to defer that one, P. Let's get to the interview section. And then if I haven't covered it, if you don't mind giving me a prod on that one, because it'll make more sense there.
And the last question for this stage, how should people deal with it if they don't necessarily have the greatest grades on their academic transcript?
Just forge them. If you get liquid paper, you can just write it. And usually where distinction is, you can write the word high No, in all seriousness, there was a case last year of somebody who was found to have doctored their testamers, and I can't remember if they got struck off or reprimanded. But never, ever, ever think of going down that path. It's just, it's one of those things where it is what it is, and I think what I would do is, if they're not great, I would probably try to explain it away. So you might say, for example, in my first year I did credits, and you'll notice that in the next year I got high credits, and the reason was, in the first year I had to support myself when I was holding down a full-time job. Or you might have had some personal circumstances in your life. I know a lot of people have to look after unwell family members, and that can affect their performance. So explain it, particularly if it's a one-off. If you've got somebody who's got some pretty good grades and all of a sudden there's one thing and it's because they're in a car accident or something like that, you can explain those. But to be honest, the world has shifted in COVID, and it will be competitive for jobs. And for a lazy assessor who's trying to cull 700 documents, an easy way to do it is based on their grades. So you will find that even if you're an absolute rock star in interview, if you don't have those grades, sometimes the firms that prioritise those will eliminate you early on in that process, and there's not much you can do about that, I'm afraid. Study harder in retrospect, or do a master's and get HDs.
Thanks, Jason.
And the College of Law has some great master's courses, right, Pia?
We certainly do.
I only say that because I'm doing one of them myself.
All right.
Alrighty. Let's kick on. How are we going on time?
We've got 20 more minutes.
Ooh,
but
okay.
I think we can keep going for as long as you're happy to keep going for, Jason, and people can drop off if they've got somewhere to be.
Sure. All right. So what's the purpose of your CV? Okay. It's not a life history. It's not a memoir. It really is a way for you to get into an interview. That's the sole purpose, is to get you an interview. Okay. So the resume highlights your skills, your experience, and your accomplishments, and particularly the ones that are relevant to the role that you're trying to get. So, for example, if you were the best salesperson at JB Hi-Fi, but you're going for a legal role, it's probably not as relevant as the fact that you might have done paralegal work at a mid-tier firm. Your CV is a billboard to advertise why you're suitable for the position. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. Tailor it for each job you go for. And there are some templates there. Pia, I'm more than happy for you to share the slides with the attendees. Seek just put out a couple of templates this week. You might want to have a look at that. It's very easy to Google legal templates, legal CVs online. Going into a bit more detail, when you're filling out your CV, answer these questions and make sure you've done that. What positives have you personally contributed to your firm? And if you're early in your career, maybe any other jobs, whether it's working at Macca's or doing volunteer work for the local community. What targets have you successfully hit before? Have you instigated an initiative that's led to business improvements? These are sorts of things that as a grad you can do. So, for example, my wife worked at the Australian Geographic store and she loved reptiles. So she would have days where she'd bring in her pet snake, and that would draw people into the store. And, you know, things like that have nothing to do with it, but it just shows a sense of initiative. And, you know, you'd remember, oh yeah, that's the candidate with the snake. You want to not be beige when it's a competitive process. So do what you can to stand out a little bit. Preparing your CV. So every CV should have the following things. Your contact details, okay? Now, keep it very vanilla. I'm Jason Elias. Here's my phone number. Some people like to put suburbs in. You know, if there's an assumption about your particular suburb, leave it out. Don't go cutesy, okay? I placed a lawyer in WA many years ago whose email was crazybeck69@hotmail. And I'm like, we've got to make that a little bit more professional. So get rid of the quirky individual ones in that area. Keep that professional, but still let your personality shine. I don't care if, like me, you look like Brad Pitt or you look like Angelina Jolie. Don't put photos in legal CVs. Okay. I've given an example one here. Just don't do it. If you're going for a job as an actor, maybe, but not for our market. Include your education and your qualifications. Now, for the rest of your life, people are going to look at your admission date. So if those of you are thinking about, should I delay my admission date? Should I get it done? Always get your admission date as soon as possible, even if you don't start a job straight away, because law firms will look at it as an excuse to pay you less. Because they'll always look at how many years post-admission experience. So try to get that admission date as soon as you can. I know there's some delays with COVID, but where you have some control. Your employment history is important. What firm, what title, what was the period? Were you full-time, part-time? Was it a contract? What were your duties and responsibilities? Did you have any particular achievements? Show some direct results of your successes. Prove the value that you're able to provide to an employer, and that helps you later down the line, not just get a job, but salary expectations. Talk about your skills, and these can include soft skills, memberships. So if you're in the Law Society or whatever, if you're a member of the Construction Lawyers Association, the Women Lawyers Association, if you're a member of your local water skiing club, badminton club, chess club, whatever your interests are, and reflect your hobbies and interests too. That gives you a little bit of personality, particularly if you've been successful. I look at CVs and I go, wow, she's a black belt in Taekwondo. If a black belt's a good thing in Taekwondo, that's impressive. So people who've achieved things in other areas of their life show a lot about their personality. And what are your interests? Do you like a particular sport? Do you like long walks in the park? What are the sorts of things that allow us to get a bit of a picture of who you are beyond your marks and your CV? And referees, always have good referees. So usually it's somebody who's supervised your work. Don't put things like my high school principal if you can avoid it, but a law lecturer might be a good person, but preferably somebody you've worked for. And if you've been studying law for 5-6 years, hopefully you've had the opportunity to work as a paralegal or a law clerk during your studies. Use formal language, use the first person, check your spelling. There's a free product called Grammarly. If you're not using it, download it today. It's awesome, and it will help you pick up contextual and grammatical issues as well as typos. A few pitfalls, as I said, don't include photos. Nothing discriminatory. I don't want to know your religion, your sexuality. I don't want to know your marital status. Any of those things should not belong on your CV and give a person an excuse to discriminate against you. Include your graduation year, your university, your admission date. If you're admitted in more than one jurisdiction, then feel free to outline if you're also in the High Court, for example. Include the months in your dates of employment. Now, if you started in 1973 and went to 2010, probably not as important. But if you started a job in 2018 and left in 2019, that could be 2 years if it was January 2018 to December 19, or it could be 2 days if you started December 18 and left January 19. So include the months. Explain any gaps. I took some time for family reasons. I traveled to Europe. I did a sabbatical. I did a master's degree. Whatever it may be, explain the gaps, because people just assume you're in jail otherwise. Be truthful, be accurate, don't embellish. And, sorry, just see if you guys can see that. Don't embellish or gild the lily at all in any of your roles, okay? That's it for CVs. Pia, do you want to have a quick break for questions?
Yeah, we haven't got a huge number of questions about CVs, Jason, but there are a few about how law students in particular can go about identifying their unique skill set to highlight in their CV?
So everybody has something unique about them, okay? We're all individuals. I think it's a Monty Python quote. So find out what yours is. So I went to Baker and McKenzie. There were 800 applicants for a summer clerkship. They took 7 of us. When I started, I was in the lift one day with the HR director, and I couldn't help myself. I said, look, can I ask you a question? I said, there were so many people that applied. I had good grades, but not, smashing grades. They were distinctions. They weren't high distinctions. What got me the opportunity to get a look in? Why did I get the job in this prestigious law firm? And not only did I get it in the law firm, I got an international clerkship, which allowed me to go work overseas for 2 months. Do you know what her answer was? They liked the fact that during university holidays, I worked at Club Med resorts around the world. So they said, Baker's is an international firm. Club Med is an international organisation. You learnt languages, you met people from different cultures. Now, I wouldn't have thought that was my USP. Go figure. So everybody has got one. I'd be more than happy at the MP if you want me to chat to one particular person and help them identify it. But it's one of those things that it's something that makes each person special, that makes them stand out. And you might have to spend a bit of time thinking about what that may be.
Now, people who have worked in fields outside the legal industry, should they leave those non-legal jobs off their CV?
Depends how far away it is. So if this was 20 years ago, you probably don't need to put it in. But if in recent times, let's say you're a mature age student and you did something else for 5 or 10 years before you moved across the law, it's very relevant. And you try to work out what the relevance is. So for example, let's say somebody was a nurse, and a lot of nurses do end up practicing law. You could say, well, I'm very interested in personal injury law and medico-legal law and professional negligence around doctors, surgeons, ancillary medicine stuff. And what I can do is bring my knowledge of the medical world into a legal world by having that unique insight, and also having credibility with clients, particularly if they're on the defendant side as well.
Now, if there are gaps in your employment history, where in the CV should you explain those?
Between the jobs. So if from 2018 to 2019 you worked at Blogs & Co, and then before that you had a year off because you had a kid, then just say family duties or maternity break or paternity break, whatever it may be. And then the next job between it.
Now, in the CV, do you recommend people separating their job history into legal roles and non-legal roles?
Depends how many there are. But I think that's not a bad idea. If the legal ones are all more recent, you do them in a row, and then non-legal roles you put underneath that.
How should you deal with the tricky situation where you want to name your current supervisor as a referee, but you don't want them to know that you've been applying for other jobs until you've been offered the position?
Yeah, so that's a common question. The most important thing is you never, ever, ever, ever name a referee without their consent. Okay, that's very, very bad form. What we do in this scenario, so there's 2 reactions. One type of lawyer goes, oh, Pia, it's been great having you. I can understand why you're going to the bar. I really wish you well. Is there anything we can do? Blah, blah, blah. And then there's the other ones that take it personally and sometimes might even kibosh your opportunity and give you a shitty reference just because they're cranky. So be careful of that. And that happens a little bit from time to time. So what we tend to do is we ask for references from not your current employer. If we do need your current employer, because maybe you've only had one job, we try to get an offer first, and that offer is subject to references. So you really, you're so far down the track, you pretty much as everything is agreed, and unless that partner just, totally, kills your chances, then you pretty much got it in the bag. So recruiters are particularly sensitive about that, and we will walk you through the process and make sure that you don't jeopardize your current job, because it becomes, for some reason, exponentially more difficult to find a job if you're not currently employed.
Yes. So I've got one other question here that says, since most of the large law firms only hire from their clerkships, if you don't have a vacation clerkship with a large firm, what is your best advice for trying to get into a large firm?
Work at another firm, become an expert in that area. So there's a lot of movement. You're not going to go from a suburban firm with one sole practitioner straight to Clayton Utes. It's not going to happen. But what you might do is, if you're working in a good mid-tier, you might move up. So people tend to move up one step at a time, and there are plenty of partners in top-tier firms that started off in sole practice, but they're not necessarily doing that in one jump. And also, think about whether the grass is greener. I mean, I got to tell you, if I knew what working in a top law firm was like before I joined there, I might not have wanted to. So don't just assume because it's got a big shiny brand name that it's actually the right place for you. There are some firms out there where they have excellent work cultures. Some of them have really, really hard work cultures. Some of them have we will pay you shitloads of money, but you work very, very hard for it. Others are, we're a bit cushier and we'll look after you. There's no good or bad. There's no judging that. The issue where there's a problem is always down to one thing, and that is expectation management. If you feel you're getting into A and it turns out to B, that's when people fall over. If you know what you're getting into beforehand and it's like that, then usually it works okay. So just make sure you research where you're going to go beforehand as well. And it's not just what the marketing people write on a website.
Do you think social media does play a big part in recruitment? For example, will law firms be looking at your Instagram account?
What a great segue. Ta-da! So, look, there is a whole new industry in the US of people who are doing social media background checks. It's less so here, and there's certain questions about privacy. But quite frankly, if any of you follow rugby league, there is a guy in New South Wales that's just about to cop a huge fine because of, during social isolation, he made a TikTok video that shows he wasn't being very socially distanced with the 4 other people dancing with him. So what goes on the web stays on the web. So if there is anything that is incriminating or could jeopardize your chances, don't put it up in the first place. Just don't. And if you have, try to get it removed, get it expunged, but just be very, very careful, because it doesn't take that much to Google and to put somebody's name in. And if stuff comes up, then they may, even unconsciously be biased and discriminate against you. So just don't let people have that opportunity to do it. Do you want me to talk about LinkedIn profiles, Pia?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, very quickly, use your own voice. Don't talk in the third person. Get a professional headshot. Headshots are on LinkedIn, not on CVs. So try not to have something smarty like this guy or a photo with somebody's arm around you from the last wedding. Use a personalized URL instead of LinkedIn/X947B. You can put your name in. Write a compelling headline. Make it like the blurb in the back of a book. Why would somebody want to click on you? And focus on recent experience and skills. Your summary is an opportunity for you to do an elevator pitch. So highlight what's special about you. Remember, a lot of firms will have keyword searches. So they won't even look at your thing. They'll just want to type in a few keywords. So make sure you play that game. Write a good summary of your experience. And you can often use rich media like videos, and have a call to action at the end. Ask people to connect with you. So connect with everyone you can. That's my theory. I've got 30,000 connections on LinkedIn. They won't let me take any new ones unless I delete old ones. So every now and again, I go through and think, oh gosh, this is an Uzbekistani boilermaker. I'm probably not going to be able to help them. So I delete them so I can invite somebody I'm going to be more used to. Describe your passions, explain your role, frame your past, highlight your successes, tell your story, be authentic, be human, tell people about your family, your hobbies, and use the rich media like the videos. LinkedIn, beyond what you're doing for your profile, how do you use LinkedIn? Connect to networks. If you go to a function, if you go to an event, make sure you get the names of people and you invite them to join you afterwards. You can import all your networks from LinkedIn, from email. Particularly, I think Gmail makes it very simple. Join groups. Join the Australian Legal Community Group. Join alumni associations. Publish your blogs and articles. Use the LinkedIn phone app in downtime. So when I'm on the bus or train, when I used to catch public transport, I used to go on and I used to wish people happy birthday and check on their careers if I placed them. And it wasn't something I had to make time to do. If I got an opportunity when I was in between meetings or on dead time on public transport, I'd do that. Make your profile public. There is an opportunity to press a button that's called seeking new opportunities, or you even write that in your heading, and that's like a red flag to recruiters to find you. And make sure you include your contact details. There's a section, and a lot of people don't include that section. If you want to see a LinkedIn profile, mine is on the bottom of that page. There are a couple of people who do really good stuff on LinkedIn, and they consult. So if you want to, if you feel like paying, I'm sure they'd be happy to give you some guidance. There's one lady called Karen Tisdell, who's an expert on LinkedIn. And there's another one, apparently you have to be called Karen Hollenbach, who's also very good. I think the first Karen's in Sydney, the other Karen's in Melbourne. But have a look at what they do for their websites and their LinkedIn profiles, and steal some tips from them. We probably don't have time for interviewing. I'm more than happy to cover that in Q&A if we need. But basically, I love this quote. It's from Groucho Marx. The secret of life is honesty and fair dealing. If you can fake that, you've got it made. So make sure that the real you comes through. Be authentic. Don't be a fake, and the world will be your oyster. Pia, flight back to you for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jason. Now we've got a whole list of them here, so I'll go through them in order. So there's one particular question, and it says, on the point of how we've made money for our firm or our previous workplaces, how do you recommend inserting that into the resume?
Yep, so I made budget for 3 years straight.
Okay, so you don't need to go into detail about what that...
Oh, no, nothing confidential, just very, very general.
Do you foresee future interviews featuring COVID-related questions? For example, what did you do during this time, or how did you adapt?
Yeah, I think that's fair game. A lot of interviews will be things that will be what they call behavioural competency interviews. And they are based on the concept that your past behaviour will indicate your future performance. And they often start with, like, tell me about a time when. So it might be, tell me about it when you're in isolation. How did you keep yourself busy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I would always say, be very honest, but for me, I found I've really enjoyed some of the time I've had to think about things a bit deeper and to read books that have been sitting on my shelf for a while and listen to podcasts and, watch some documentaries and even the odd bit of Netflix. So I would, I'd answer honestly, but just say, this is what I did and this is what I think would be relevant for the role. Don't go off on too many tangents. I saw a very funny cartoon the other day where it's an interview and the question is like, what did you do? How did you spend 2020? And the candidate goes, I spent most of it looking for toilet paper.
Now, if you're a new lawyer and you have previous experience in other fields, for example, finance, what's the best way to start a law career without losing the finance skills?
I don't think you lose any skills necessarily. And particularly if you practice law in the commercial world, a lot of those skills will come forward, whether it's mergers and acquisitions or even finance law, obviously. So I don't think you can ever develop a skill that you lose. But what I would probably do is try to focus my legal career to take advantage of that as much as possible. So, for example, I learned how to speak Indonesian at university. So anytime there was a matter in my firm with a bit of an Indonesian angle, I tried to get involved in that as well. So use your skills and you can add extra value there. That's your USP there. You found it.
Now, is there anything in particular people need to keep in mind if they are applying for jobs in government or non-profit organisations as opposed to private law firms?
Yes, they're very different, those two, as well as from private practice. So governments tend to be very much about the process. So there will be selection criteria and you will need to address those selection criteria. And if there's 6 selection criteria and you address 5, you probably won't make it. So be very conscious of their process. They will have interviews where they will have a panel and every single candidate will get all the same questions. So they run it very rigidly because obviously there could be a freedom of information request, and they, when there are questions about it, about how it's normally around how the process ran and whether there are any inconsistencies in the process. So process is very important. Not for profit, I think it really depends. It's hard to generalise. I did a lot of work in the Indigenous space, particularly in WA actually, Pia, and my clients were predominantly Indigenous land councils, and they were working on native title matters that were high value, and often the lawyers on the other side were from big city law firms. And they had a motto, and their motto was they wanted a mercenary, not a missionary. So they didn't want to know about your values and your personal beliefs as much as they wanted to know that you're a really good lawyer. And it's kind of assumed that if you're applying to go work in an Aboriginal land council that's going to pay you a quarter of what you get in a top tier firm, that you've already got some sort of inclination towards that. But if they had a choice of someone whose political beliefs were super aligned, or somebody who was a great lawyer who could deliver an outcome for traditional owners, they want a good technical lawyer who's able to deliver that. Obviously, they want both. But, just be careful that you don't over push that front. I think first and foremostly, look at the position description and fulfill those criteria.
What would you recommend for those fresh graduates who haven't been in a position to undertake any kind of legal work experience during their degrees?
Get some. Get some experience. And the more relevant it is, the less likely that the HR person can't see the relevance. So, for example, I have a friend who at one stage had a law firm in 4 cities, and he was the sole equity partner. Guess where his first job was? Macca's. And to this day, he still says that the training he got in management from McDonald's helped him build scale and systems and process into the law firm that he ran. So find something that's relevant. Obviously, flipping burgers is less relevant than working as a law clerk. A law clerk is less relevant than working as a paralegal. But there are plenty of partners in law firms that have started off in the mailroom. Get close to the legal community.
How long should your CV be?
As long as a piece of string. Look, it's if you're more experienced and you've got lots to talk about, maybe 3 to 4 pages. If you're grad, there's probably not that much you can do. I'd probably look at 2 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
There's no. I was going to say rule of thumb, but I've stopped saying that. If you're curious about these things, Google what the rule of thumb is. It's quite awful. But the general rule is keep it shorter. In America, they only like 1 page, but here probably between 2 and 4 pages is optimum.
How do you find out about a company's culture before you start working for them?
Yep. So there are a few things. There's a website called Glassdoor that has reviews. It's like kind of Yelp or TripAdvisor. I think Seek at one point had a review site about firms, but the best thing to do is find out who of your mates works there and find out what it's like. And remember, generalizing about a firm is kind of a bit like saying all lawyers are good or all lawyers are bad. In the firm I worked with, there were partners that I'd be prepared to name my children after because they were just the most wonderful people in the world. And there are also partners that weren't great. They weren't nice people. They were narcissists, whatever it was. In any law firm, you're going to get a range of personalities. So it's probably more relevant to ask the question, what's the team you're going to be in like, rather than what the firm's like. Because if you've got a firm that's all rainbows and unicorns, but you're working with the one bastard partner, it's not going to be rainbows and unicorns for you.
And we've still got quite a few questions, but I'm going to wrap it up with one more.
Sure.
We've gone a few minutes over, and I really appreciate your time today, Jason. But how much detail should people go into with their job descriptions on their LinkedIn profile?
I probably think between 3 and 6 bullet points would be enough. Yeah. I'm happy if anyone has other questions to join the LinkedIn group, Australian Legal Community. If they post their questions, then I'll answer them. If they're feeling a bit shy and don't want to have their name up there, then I'm more than happy if they want to just email me. I probably can't get around to everyone, but I'm more than happy to see what I can help where I can. And my email is just simply jason@eliasrecruitment.com.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry, Pia, one more thing. Sorry. Because I get so many questions about this, I've actually made a guide on this stuff. So it's, I think, a 40-page guide, and I'm more than happy to give that to you if anyone's interested, or people could just email me and I'll give them a copy of the guide. It's free. It's just there because I get so many people who say to me, where do I find out this stuff? We don't get taught it at uni. We don't get taught it anywhere. It'd be just nice to be able to see it in one place. So more than happy to make that available too.
Thank you so much, Jason. That would be brilliant. And thank you very, very much for your time and for everybody else who attended today. Have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.